The Soul's Pride dropped out of hyperspace into hell. Nexus Station burned in the distance, massive sections of its hull torn open and bleeding atmosphere into space. The Devourer ships moved around it like metal sharks, their black hulls covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. "Sweet mother of..." Tae-young whispered from the tactical station, then caught himself. "Captain, I'm reading 1 heavy cruiser, 4 destroyer-class vessels, and approximately 60 smaller attack craft." Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop. The largest Devourer ship was easily 3 times the size of anything in the human fleet. Its hull bristled with weapons that could probably vaporize the Soul's Pride with a single shot. "Nare," he called down, to engineering. "How long can we maintain full power?" "Maybe 30 minutes before the engines blow," she replied. "And that's if we're lucky." "Plasma cannon status?" 23 shots at full power, Tae-young reported. "After that, we're down to emergency batteries." Minho looked up from the security console, his face grim. "Captain, with respect, we're not going to win this fight." Hyunwoo knew his security chief was right. Any rational analysis said they should turn around and run. But through the main viewport he could see civilian evacuation ships fleeing from the station. Small cargo haulers and passenger transports packed with families and children, moving as fast as their civilian engines could manage. The Devourer fighters were hunting them. "Those people are going to die anyway," Minho continued quietly. "Maybe we should at least make our deaths count for something." Young Mi's voice came over the intercom from the galley. "Captain, I've been thinking. Those Devourer ships are big, but they're also old. Really old. Their targeting systems might not be designed for something as small and fast as us." It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was something. Hyunwoo made his decision. "All right, people. We can't fight them ship to ship, so we're going to get creative. Nare, can you use the cargo clamps to attach debris to our hull?" "Debris, sir?" "Armor," Hyunwoo explained. "If we can't avoid getting hit, maybe we can survive it. Use anything big enough to stop a laser blast." "I'll try, Captain. But it's going to make us slower and less maneuverable. Better slow and alive than fast and dead. Tae-young, target the fighter craft first. They're the biggest threat to the evacuation ships." The Soul's Pride moved toward the battle, her cargo clamps extending to grab chunks of station debris. Twisted metal plates and structural beams attached to the hull, creating an improvised shell around the ship's vital systems. The first Devourer fighters noticed them when they were still 5 kilometers away. 3 sleek black craft peeled off from the main attack and headed straight for the human ship. "Incoming," Tae-young announced. 3 fighters, attack vector Alpha 7. "Take them," Hyunwoo ordered. The plasma cannon fired, its bright blue beam slicing through space to catch the lead fighter center mass. The Devourer ship exploded in a shower of metal and sparks, but the other 2 kept coming. Their return fire hammered into the Soul's Pride's improvised armor, sending shockwaves through the hull. Emergency lights flickered as power systems strained to handle the damage. "Hull breach on deck 3, Minho reported. "Emergency bulkheads are holding." "Second target locked," Tae-young called. The plasma cannon fired again, this time clipping the wing of a Devourer fighter. The alien craft spun out of control and crashed into a piece of station debris. The third fighter got close enough to strafe the Soul's Pride with some kind of energy weapon that made the whole ship ring like a bell. But Young Mi had been right about one thing. The Devourer targeting system seemed confused by such a small target moving so erratically. "Got him," Tae-young said, as the plasma cannon found its mark again. But more fighters were coming. The Devourer ships had noticed the lone human vessel and were starting to treat it as a serious threat. "Captain," Jin Seo called from the communication console, "I'm picking up something strange on the Devourer communication channels." "What kind of strange?" "They're using the station's local network to coordinate their attacks. All their ships are linked through the civilian communication system." Hyunwoo thought about that. Most military vessels had their own secure networks, but the Devourers were machines. They probably saw no difference between military and civilian systems. Data was data. "Can you access that network?" he asked. "I think so, sir. The station. Emergency protocols give rescue ships full access to all systems." "Do it." and then flood their network with everything you can think of. Sir? Garbage data. Entertainment feeds, shipping manifests, personal messages, anything that will clog up their communications. Jin Seo's fingers flew over her controls. Within minutes, the Devourer communication network was flooded with human music, cooking shows, shopping lists, and personal video messages from the station's civilian population. The effect was immediate. The Devourer fighters began moving more slowly, their formation attacks becoming less coordinated. The machine collective was trying to process all the irrelevant data, and it was slowing down their combat responses. "It's working," Tae Young reported. "Their response time is increasing." But the Soul's Pride was taking damage. The improvised armor was holding, but barely. Atmosphere leaked from a dozen small breaches, and the ship's systems were running on backup power. "Nare," Hyunwoo called, "can you give me more power?" "I can reroute life support to weapons," she replied. "But we'll only have about 20 minutes of air after that. Do it." The plasma cannon's next shot was noticeably brighter and more powerful. It punched clean through a Devourer fighter and kept going, damaging another ship behind it. But now the bigger ships were getting involved. One of the destroyer-class vessels turned its attention to the annoying little human ship and fired a beam weapon that could have cut a battleship in half. The Soul's Pride rolled desperately to avoid the shot, her hull groaning from the stress of the maneuver. The beam passed close enough to melt some of the outer armor plating. "We can't keep this up much longer," Minho said. Hyunwoo knew he was right. They had saved maybe 24 civilian ships so far, but there were still hundreds of people trapped on the station. And the Soul's Pride was falling apart around them. That's when Dong Hyun, the ship's medic who had been pressed into service as an auxiliary gunner, made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain," he called from the secondary weapons station, "I think I found something. The Devourer's shield frequencies, they're not random. They follow a mathematical pattern." "What kind of pattern?" "Fibonacci sequence, but modified. The shields rotate through different frequencies, but there's a gap every 12th cycle, a window where they're vulnerable for about 0.3 seconds. Hyunwoo felt a spark of hope. "Can you time our shots to hit those gaps?" "Maybe. If I can sync our weapons to their shield rotation, we might be able to punch through their defenses." "Do it." For the next 10 minutes, Dong Hyun worked his magic. Every shot from the Soul's Pride was timed perfectly, hitting the Devourer ships during their brief moments of vulnerability. Fighters that had seemed invincible suddenly began exploding under human fire, but success brought new problems. The Devourer cruiser was moving toward them now, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. This close, Hyunwoo could see that its hull wasn't just black, it seemed to absorb light, creating a hole in space shaped like a warship. "Captain," Nore's voice came over the intercom, tight with fear. "That thing is charging some kind of main weapon. Energy readings are off." The charts. Through the viewport, Hyunwoo could see lights beginning to glow along the cruiser's forward hull. Whatever weapon it was preparing would definitely destroy the Soul's Pride, improvised armor or not. But it would also destroy the evacuation ships they were protecting. Hyunwoo made another impossible decision. "Nare, I need you to overload the engines. Not just past red line, I need everything they've got." "Captain, if I do that, the engines will explode. We'll have maybe 2 minutes before complete power failure." "Then we better make those 2 minutes count. Jinseo, plot a course for the cruiser's docking bay." "Sir?" Jinseo's voice was very small. "We're going to ram them." The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. "All hands," Hyunwoo said over the ship-wide intercom. "Prepare for boarding action. We're taking the fight to them." So Young spoke up from where she had been preparing medical supplies. "Captain, I can make explosives from the agricultural chemicals in cargo hold too. Fertilizer and fuel makes a pretty good bomb." "Do it. Minho, break out the personal weapons. Everyone who can hold a gun is now a Marine." The Soul's Pride accelerated toward the Devourer cruiser, her engines screaming at power levels they were never designed to handle. The human ship was tiny compared to the alien vessel, but sometimes small things could cause big problems, especially when they were piloted by humans who were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The cruiser's main weapon finished charging just as the Soul's Pride reached its docking bay. The last thing Hyunwoo saw through the viewport was the shocked recognition in the alien machine's sensors as 12 humans decided to bring the war inside. The impact threw everyone against the bulkheads, but somehow, impossibly, they were still alive, and now they were inside the enemy ship. "All right, people," Hyunwoo said, "check." 3 months after the council vote, Hyunwoo was hauling fertilizer to the agricultural colonies when everything changed. The Soul's Pride wasn't much to look at, a converted cargo hauler with patched hull plating and engines that rattled when pushed too hard. But she was fast, reliable, and had kept his crew fed for the past 5 years. "Captain," Nare called from the engine room, her voice crackling over the ship's old communication system. "We're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors." Hyunwoo floated up from his captain's chair on the bridge, the artificial gravity set low to save power during the long haul to Kepler Station. Through the main viewport, space looked empty and peaceful. Stars dotted the darkness like scattered diamonds, and the distant glow of the system's primary star painted everything in soft golden light. "What kind of readings?" he asked, settling into the navigation console where Jin Seo was studying the sensor displays. Jin Seo was young, barely 25, but she had good instincts for the work. Her fingers danced across the controls, adjusting filters and amplifying weak signals. "Energy signatures, Captain. Big ones. And they're moving fast." "Pirates?" Hyunwoo asked. Cargo haulers were favorite targets for raiders looking for easy money. The Soul's Pride carried only agricultural supplies, but pirates weren't always smart enough to check the manifest before attacking. "No, sir," Jin Seo said, her voice getting tight with worry. "These readings are way too big for pirate ships. And the energy patterns. I've never seen anything like this." Nare's voice came over the intercom again. "Captain, you need to get down here now." Hyunwoo pushed off from the bridge and floated down the main corridor to the engine room. The Soul's Pride was old, but Nare kept her running like a ship half her age. The engineer knew every bolt and wire on the vessel, could fix almost anything with spare parts and determination. She was standing in front of the main sensor array, her dark hair floating around her face in the low gravity. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of local space with bright red dots moving toward the inner system. "Those aren't normal ships, Captain," Nare said quietly. "Look at the size of them." Hyunwoo studied the readings. The largest signature was easily 10 times bigger than a standard battleship. The smaller ones were still larger than most military vessels he'd ever seen. And they were all heading toward Nexus Station. "Have you ever seen energy patterns like these?" he asked. Nare shook her head. "Never. But Captain, I think I know what they are." She pulled up a file on her personal tablet, one of the classified military briefings that somehow made their way to civilian ships despite official secrecy. The document showed grainy images of massive black vessels covered in geometric patterns. "That hurt to look at. Devourers," she whispered. Hyunwoo felt his blood turn cold. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Devourers, but they were like stories told to frighten children, ancient machines that had disappeared centuries ago, leaving behind only empty worlds and scattered wreckage. They were supposed to be gone, extinct, destroyed by their own endless hunger. "Are you sure?" he asked. "The energy signatures match." "Perfectly," Nare said. "Captain, if those are really Devourers heading for Nexus Station." She didn't need to finish. Nexus Station was home to over 200,000 beings from 17 different species. It was a major trade hub, a stopping point for ships traveling between the core worlds and the frontier colonies. Families lived there. Children. Old people who had retired to the peaceful station to watch ships come and go. Jin Seo's voice came over the intercom, high and scared. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal from Nexus Station. They're requesting immediate assistance from any military vessels in the area." Hyunwoo pushed back up to the bridge, his mind racing. The nearest Galactic Defense Force base was 6 hours away by hyperspace jump. Even if they left immediately, they wouldn't arrive in time to help. By then, Nexus Station would be nothing but debris. The main display showed the station in the distance, a bright cluster of lights against the darkness of space. As they watched, smaller lights began moving away from the station. Evacuation. Ships probably trying to get civilians to safety. But there weren't enough ships. There never were in situations like this. Most of the station's population would be trapped, waiting for help that wouldn't come in time. "Captain," Jinseo said quietly, "what are your orders?" Standard procedure was clear. Civilian vessels should jump to safety and report the situation to proper authorities. The Soul's Pride had a single plasma cannon that was meant for scaring off small pirates not fighting ancient war machines. They had 12 people on board, mostly cargo handlers and engineers. Any sane captain would run. Hyunwoo looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had been with him for years. They trusted him to make the right decisions, to keep them safe, to bring them home to their families. But he also thought about the families on Nexus Station. The children who were probably crying in evacuation shelters. The parents trying to comfort them while watching the sky for rescue ships that weren't coming. "Jinseo," he said finally, "send a message to GDF Command. Tell them we have confirmed Devourer ships moving on Nexus Station. Request immediate assistance." "Yes, sir," she replied, her fingers already working on the communication console. "Nare," Hyunwoo continued, "I need everything you can give me. Power, speed, weapons, everything." There was a long pause over the intercom. Then, "Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "We can't just leave them," Hyunwoo said simply. "Sir," Jinseo interrupted, "GDF Command is responding. They're dispatching a battle group, but estimated arrival time is 5 hours and 43 minutes, nearly 6 hours. The Devourers would be finished with Nexus Station long before then." Hyunwoo activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We have a situation. Nexus Station is under attack by hostile forces. Military assistance is hours away. I am ordering a course change to provide what assistance we can." He paused, knowing what he was asking of. His crew. "Anyone who objects can take an escape pod now. No questions asked, no shame in it. But if you stay, we're going into a fight we probably can't win." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Tae-young's voice came from the tactical station. "Captain, plasma cannon is charging. Estimated time to full power, 12 minutes. Min-ho spoke up from the security console. "Weapons locker is open, sir. We've got small arms and emergency equipment ready to deploy." One by one, the rest of the crew checked in. Nare from engineering, reporting full power to engines and weapons. Young Mi from the galley, saying she had medical supplies ready if needed. Each person making the choice to stay, to fight, even though they all knew them. "Odds." "Thank you," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Jinseo, plot a course for Nexus Station, maximum speed." "Course plotted, Captain. Engage." The Soul's Pride turned toward the distant station, her engines pushing harder than they had in years. Through the viewport, they could see the first flashes of weapons fire as the Devourer ships began their attack. Hyunwoo settled into his command chair and watched the tactical display. 12 humans in a cargo ship, heading toward an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was the right thing to do. "Time to station?" he asked. 17 minutes at current speed. Jinseo replied. "Narai, can we go faster?" "I can push the engines past red line, but we'll only have maybe 30 minutes before they burn out completely." "Do it." The ship shuddered as the engines increased power beyond their safety limits. The hull plates creaked and groaned from the stress, but the Soul's Pride held together. "New time to station?" Hyunwoo asked. 12 minutes, Captain." Through the viewport, the weapons fire around Nexus Station was getting brighter and more intense. The Devourers were beginning their assault in earnest, their massive ships moving into attack formation like predators surrounding wounded prey. Hyunwoo thought about the council session 3 months ago, about the aliens who had laughed at human military capabilities. They had said humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, too primitive to be trusted with serious military responsibility. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was exactly the kind of emotional, irrational decision that proved humans weren't ready. for the big leagues, but looking at Nexus Station under attack, watching civilian evacuation ships trying desperately to escape, Hyun-woo knew he couldn't live with himself if he ran away. 10 minutes to station, Jin Seo announced. Plasma cannon at full charge, Tae-young reported. Engineering ready, Naray called. All hands, Hyun-woo said over the intercom. Prepare for combat operations. The Soul's Pride raced toward Nexus Station, her cargo holds full of fertilizer. For peaceful farming colonies, her weapons powered for a war that had started before humans had learned to use fire. Ahead of them, the Devourers waited like mechanical spiders in an electronic web. It was going to be a very long day. The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber stretched high above the assembled delegates. Sunlight from 3 different stars filtered through the transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. Daeho stood at the center podium, his black diplomatic uniform simple compared to the exotic clothing and natural forms of the alien representatives around him. He looked up at the curved rows of seats where 47 different species sat in judgment. Some had multiple eyes that blinked in patterns he couldn't understand. Others floated in water-filled tanks or glowed with their own inner light. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange that Daeho had to remind himself they were intelligent beings. Honored delegates, Daeho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. I come before you today to request full military integration for the human species into the Galactic Defense Force. A low rumble of conversation started immediately. The Vorthak delegate, a creature that looked like a giant praying mantis covered in silver armor, clicked its razor-sharp mandibles together. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. The humans want to play soldier, the Vorthak said. Its voice translated into dozens of languages at once. How amusing. Subin sat in the gallery above, her hands gripped tightly in her lap. She had worked with Daeho for 3 years, helping prepare for this moment. They had studied every species in the council, learned their customs, practiced the presentation hundreds of times. But looking at the faces around the chamber, she could see this was not going well. Daeho continued speaking, ignoring the murmurs. Humanity has proven itself capable in several conflicts along the Outer Rim. We have protected trade routes and defended colonies from pirate attacks. Our soldiers are brave and our technology is advancing rapidly. The delegate from Thalassa, a blue-skinned being that breathed through gills on its neck, made a bubbling sound that Subin knew meant laughter. The humans have fought pirates and smugglers, children with toys. They think this makes them ready for real war. We have been watching your species for 50 years, said another voice. This came from the Luxarian delegate, a being made of pure energy that spoke through a mechanical translator. You fight among yourselves constantly. Your planet is covered, with weapons pointed at your own cities. This is not the behavior of a mature military species. Bora felt her jaw muscles tighten. She stood in the military observer section, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Terran Defense Force. The medals on her chest represented real battles, real victories against enemies that had tried to destroy human colonies. She had lost good people in those fights, friends who died protecting others. The insult burned, but Bora stayed silent. This was Daeho's show. I understand your concerns, Daeho said, his voice staying calm and professional, but I ask you to consider what humanity can offer. We adapt quickly to new situations. We think creatively when traditional methods fail, and we never give up, even when things look impossible. This brought more laughter from the assembled delegates. The Kronari representative, a reptilian creature with scales that shifted colors when it was amused, hissed something that the translator rendered as, "Never giving up is not a military strategy. It's just stupidity with extra steps." The Zerion delegate spoke next. These beings looked like walking crystals, their bodies made of living stone that grew and changed as they aged. The young species always think they are special. They believe their particular way of fighting makes them unique. But war is mathematics. It is technology and training and experience. Emotion is a weakness that gets soldiers killed. Subin watched. Daeho's shoulders tensed slightly. Only someone who knew him well would notice. He was getting angry, but he couldn't show it. Not here. Not in front of beings who already thought humans were too emotional to be trusted with serious responsibility. With respect, Deho said, I believe you underestimate the value of determination. Yes, we are emotional. But emotion drives us to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It makes us fight harder when the enemy thinks we are beaten. Emotion makes you unpredictable, the Vorthak delegate replied. Unpredictable allies are dangerous allies. How do we know you won't turn your weapons on us when you decide we are the enemy? The chamber fell quiet. This was the real question, the one that had been hanging over human integration from the beginning. Earth's history was full of wars, betrayals, and violence. Other species had moved past such things centuries ago. They had evolved beyond the need for conflict within their own kind. Humans were different. They still fought each other, still struggled with the same tribal instincts that had helped them survive on their original planet. To the advanced species of the galaxy, this made them seem primitive and dangerous. Deho took a deep breath. Because we know what it's like to face extinction. We know what it means to fight for survival. When we make an alliance, we keep it. When we give our word, we honor it. Our history may be violent, but it has also taught us the true value of peace. The Quantum Collective's representative spoke without words, its thoughts transmitted directly into the translation system. The voice that emerged was cold and mechanical. Pretty words. But actions matter more than promises. You ask us to trust you with the defense of our worlds based on potential rather than proof. Bora couldn't stay quiet anymore. She stepped forward, knowing she was breaking protocol. You want proof? Look at the Kepler-7 incident. 3. Human freighters held off a raider fleet for 6 hours until help arrived. They saved 4,000 civilians from 12 different species. 2 of those ships were destroyed, but their crews never stopped fighting. Unauthorized personnel will not speak during formal proceedings, the chamber's AI announced. Security drones began moving toward Bora, but Deho raised his hand. Commander Bora served in that battle, he said. Her testimony is relevant to our application. The council's speaker, an ancient being whose species had died out millennia ago but whose consciousness lived on in the chamber's central computer, made the decision. The human commander may speak, but briefly. Bora looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien eyes as she could. You think we're primitive because we still fight each other. You're right. We do. But that's also why we know how to fight. When the raiders came to Kepler-7, the other species there surrendered immediately. They followed standard procedure. They waited for rescue. She paused, remembering. The humans didn't surrender. We couldn't. Because we knew those raiders would kill the civilians anyway. So we fought with cargo haulers and mining equipment and anything else we could find. We lost 87 people that day. But 4,000 others lived because we were too stupid to know when we were beaten. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the constant background hum of the translation systems seemed muted. That's what you're really afraid of, Bora continued. Not that we'll betray you, but that will make you look bad. Because when the real monsters come, when the galaxy faces something that can't be reasoned with or bought off or scared away, you'll need soldiers who are too stubborn to die quietly. The speaker's voice filled the chamber. The testimony is noted. Commander, please return to your position. Bora stepped back, knowing she had probably just ended her career. But some things were more important than following rules. Deho finished his presentation with statistics and technical data about human military capabilities. He talked about their growing fleet, their improving technology, their successful joint operations with other species. But Subin could see that the real decision had already been made. When the vote was called, the result was exactly what they had expected. 43 species voted against human integration. Only 4 voted in favor, the youngest species in the council, the ones who still remembered being dismissed by their elders. The motion is denied, the speaker announced. Humanity will be restricted to support roles within the Galactic Defense Force. Combat operations remain prohibited. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, many of them were still laughing. The Vorthak delegate paused near the human section, its compound eyes glittering with amusement. "Perhaps in another century, little mammals," it said. "When you've learned to control yourselves." Daeho, Su-bin, and Bo-Ra walked out of the chamber together, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. None of them spoke until they reached their transport. "Well," Daeho said finally, "that went about as expected." "They'll change their minds," Bo-Ra said quietly. "Someday, something will happen that makes them realize they need us." Su-bin looked back at the crystal dome, where light still flickered as the various delegations prepared to return to their homeworlds. "Let's hope we're still willing to help when that day comes." 6 months later, the call that everyone had feared finally came. Sang-Ho stood on the bridge of the Incheon, humanity's newest warship, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The Arcturus system was supposed to be the most heavily defended position in Council space, home to 12 different species and protected by the finest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. Now it was a graveyard. "Final count, sir?" asked Yu-jin, his young tactical officer. 47 ships destroyed, Sang-Ho replied quietly, including the Council flagship Harmony of Spheres. Total casualties estimated at over 30,000. The Devourer fleet responsible for the massacre was 3 times larger than the force that had attacked Nexus Station. Worse, these machines had learned from their previous defeat. They moved differently now, adapted to counter the tactics that had worked before. "GDF Command is requesting immediate assistance," reported Hyawan from the communication station. "All available Council ships are to jump to Arcturus and engage the enemy." Sang-Ho almost smiled. After 6 months of being banned from combat operations, humanity was suddenly welcome at the party. But only because everyone else was dead or dying. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump." The human task force wasn't large by Council standards. 6 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and the Incheon herself, a heavy battleship that had been built incorporating lessons learned from the Nexus Station battle. But every ship was crewed by veterans who understood what they were facing. Bo-Ra commanded the destroyer Busan, her crew hand-picked from survivors of previous Devourer encounters. Chungmin led a marine contingent aboard the cruiser Daegu, their environmental suits modified for boarding operations in hostile alien environments. As the fleet prepared to jump, Sang-Ho received an encrypted message from Admiral Wan-Ho back on Earth. "The Council is watching," the old Admiral's recorded voice said. "This time they can't ignore what happens. Make it count." The hyperspace jump lasted 3 hours, long enough for every human in the fleet to think about what they were heading into. The crew of the Soul's Pride had been lucky, catching a small Devourer fleet by surprise. This would be different. They dropped out of hyperspace to find hell waiting for them. The Arcturus system burned with the light of a dozen suns as massive Devourer ships moved between the planets like metal gods. The orbital stations were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The few surviving Council ships fled toward the system's edge, their weapons depleted and their crews broken. "Contact," Yu-jin called. "Multiple Devourer ships changing course. To intercept, I'm counting at Sweet Mother. I'm counting over 200 vessels." Through the main viewport, Sang-Ho could see them coming. A wall of black metal that stretched from one side of the system to the other. Each ship was larger than the human vessels, more heavily armed, more advanced in every measurable way. "All ships," Sang-Ho broadcast to his fleet. "Remember what you learned in training. These things are machines, but they're not perfect. They adapt, but they adapt slowly. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't give them time to figure out what you're doing." The first wave of Devourer fighters reached the human fleet within minutes, but instead of engaging them ship to ship, the humans did something unexpected. They scattered. Bo-Ra took the Busan into the debris field of a destroyed space station, using the wreckage as cover while her crew targeted Devourer ships with improvised weapons. Myung-soo, her weapons officer, had loaded the torpedo tubes with containers of industrial nanobots, tiny machines designed for construction work, but devastating when introduced to enemy systems. Changmin led the Daegu directly toward the Yando, largest devourer ship, not to ram it but to get close enough for a boarding action. His Marines launched themselves across space in modified environmental suits, their weapons designed to fight in the corridors of alien vessels. The Incheon herself became the center of a hurricane of destruction. Hyewan coordinated not just their own weapons, but a network of automated defense drones that had been scattered throughout the system. Each drone was too small to threaten a devourer ship individually, but working together, they could swarm enemy vessels like mechanical locusts. Their coordination is breaking down, Yujin reported. The individual ship AIs are having trouble adapting to multiple simultaneous threat types. Sang-ho nodded. This was what humans did best: create chaos where their enemies expected order, find solutions that existed outside normal tactical thinking. But the Devourers were learning. New contacts, Yujin announced. Something big coming in from the outer system. The tactical display updated to show a massive signature approaching from behind the system's outermost planet. When it finally became visible, Sang-ho felt his blood turn cold. It was a Devourer city ship, a vessel the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and carrying the collective intelligence of an entire machine civilization. That thing could destroy our entire fleet with a single shot, Yujin whispered. Then we don't give it the chance, Sang-ho replied. He opened a channel to all human ships. This is Admiral Sang-ho to all vessels. We're going to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to form a defensive sphere around the civilian evacuation ships and hold position until they can escape. The response was immediate. Every human ship acknowledged the order, even though they all understood what it meant. They would be outnumbered 50-1, with no hope of victory and no chance of retreat. For the next 6 hours, the human fleet fought the most impossible battle in galactic history. They didn't try to defeat the Devourer fleet. That was beyond their capabilities. Instead, they held the line, protecting the evacuation ships carrying survivors from the destroyed orbital stations. The Busan died first, her hull cracked open by concentrated fire from 12 Devourer destroyers. But Bora kept her weapons firing until the reactor exploded, taking 3 enemy ships with her. The Daegu lasted longer, Changmin's boarding parties fighting their way through enemy vessels, even as their own ship burned around them. When the cruiser finally fell, half the Devourer fleet had been crippled by human Marines fighting with improvised weapons and unlimited determination. One by one, the human ships fell. But they didn't die quietly, and they didn't die alone. The defining moment came when the city ship fired its main weapon at the evacuation fleet. The beam was powerful enough to vaporize a planet, aimed at defenseless civilian transports carrying refugees from dozens of species. Myung-soo threw himself between the beam and the civilian ships. Not his ship, himself. He launched from the crippled destroyer he had been commanding, wearing only an environmental suit and carrying a jury-rigged explosive device. The city ship's targeting systems, designed to track large vessels, couldn't lock onto something so small moving so erratically. The explosion when he reached the weapon's focusing array was barely visible against the massive bulk of the city ship. But it was enough to disrupt the beam, causing it to miss the evacuation fleet by mere kilometers. When the GDF relief fleet finally arrived 8 hours later, they found something unprecedented. The Devourer city ship was drifting powerless, its central intelligence core disabled by human Marines who had somehow fought their way to its heart. The rest of the enemy fleet was either destroyed or fleeing toward the galactic rim and surrounding. The evacuation ships, like guards who had died at their posts, were the broken hulls of 6 human vessels. The rescue ships found survivors in the wreckage, barely 200 humans out of the thousands who had jumped into the system. But they had saved over 40,000 civilians from 17 different species. The footage was broadcast live across the galaxy. There was no way to classify it, no way to hide what had happened. Every being in Council space watched as humans, proved that sometimes courage matters more than firepower. In the Council chamber, the emergency session was different from any that had come before. The same delegates who had laughed at human military applications now sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Daeho stood at the central podium for the 3rd time, but he wasn't making requests anymore. "Honored delegates," he began. "Humanity formally requests command authority over all Galactic Defense Force operations." The chamber erupted. Representatives demanded explanations, questioned human qualifications, argued about precedent and protocol, but the speaker's ancient voice cut through. The chaos. The footage speaks for itself. When faced with impossible odds, humans do not retreat. They do not surrender. They find a way to win, or they die trying to make victory possible for others. The vote was swift and unanimous. Every species that had survived the Devourer incursions voted to place their military forces under human command, because they had finally learned the truth that the crew of the Soul's Pride had tried to show them months ago. Humans don't fight despite impossible odds. They fight because of them. As the session ended and the galaxy prepared for humanity's new role as its military leaders, Deho thought about the laughter he had heard in this same chamber just over a year ago. The beings who had dismissed his species as too emotional, too primitive, too unpredictable for serious military responsibility, now looked to them for salvation. The council had stopped laughing, and across the galaxy, humanity's enemies had learned to fear the... 3 days after the incident, Jae-hoon sat in his small office in the Terran Intelligence Division, staring at the most impossible collection of data he had ever seen. The complete sensor records from Nexus Station showed everything. 12 humans in a cargo ship destroying an entire Devourer fleet, but nobody believed it. "It has to be fake," Director Chang had said during the emergency briefing. "Propaganda, maybe, or some kind of elaborate hoax." Jae-hoon had spent 72 hours straight analyzing the data. He had run every test he could think of, checked for signs of digital manipulation, compared the energy signatures against known weapon systems. Everything checked out. The recordings were real. The problem was that they showed something impossible. His computer chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council. The emergency session had been called for today, and human representatives were required to attend. Jae-hoon gathered his data files and prepared for another round of alien skepticism. The council chamber looked the same as it had 3 months ago, but the mood was different. Where before there had been casual dismissal of human capabilities, now there was something closer to confusion. The representatives spoke in hushed tones, their various forms of communication, creating a low buzz of uncertainty. Ambassador Dae-ho stood at the central podium again, but this time he wasn't asking for anything. He was simply presenting facts. "Honored delegates," he began. 3 days ago, the cargo vessel Soul's Pride responded to a distress call from Nexus Station. What happened next has been recorded by multiple independent sensor arrays. The main display activated, showing the tactical overview of the battle. Jae-hoon watched the familiar sequence of events unfold. The tiny human ship moving against impossible odds, the Devourer fleet's gradual destruction, the final sacrifice that saved the station. The Vorthak representative clicked its mandibles in what Jae-hoon recognized as nervous agitation. This data is clearly fabricated. No single ship could accomplish such a feat, especially not a civilian cargo hauler. The sensor readings are confirmed by 17 different monitoring stations, Dae-ho replied calmly. The wreckage has been examined by GDF investigators. The survivors have given consistent testimony. Yoonji sat in the military observer section, wearing her new uniform as human military liaison. She had been promoted after the Council's previous rejection of human integration, a gesture that everyone understood was largely symbolic. But now she found herself at the center of the galaxy's most important military discussion. The Thalassen delegates' gills fluttered with what might have been disbelief. Even if we accept that this data is accurate, it proves nothing about human military potential. This was clearly an anomaly, a series of fortunate accidents that will never be repeated. One ship, the Zarian representative added, its crystalline form pulsing with skeptical energy. One engagement, you cannot judge an entire species' military capabilities based on a single battle. Jae-hoon wanted to laugh, but he kept his expression neutral. The same beings who had dismissed humanity based on their history of internal conflicts now wanted to ignore their greatest military victory because it was only one battle. The Quantum Collective's representative transmitted its thoughts directly to the translation system. The Devourers were an ancient threat, weakened by centuries of dormancy. Any properly equipped military force could have achieved similar results. Yunji stood up, knowing she was breaking protocol again. But some things were more important than diplomatic courtesy. With respect, honored delegate, when was the last time your forces engaged Devourer ships in combat? The chamber fell silent. The truth was that none of the Council species had fought the Devourers in living memory. They had all assumed the ancient enemy was extinct, destroyed by time and their own insatiable hunger. That is not relevant, the Quantum Collective replied. Our analysis of the battle data shows numerous tactical errors and violations of standard military doctrine. The human success was due to luck, not skill. What kind of luck? Yunji asked, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The luck of using mining equipment as weapons? The luck of flooding enemy communications with garbage data? The luck of ramming a cargo ship into a battle cruiser? She gestured toward the tactical display, where the battle was playing in slow motion. Every single action taken by that crew violated standard doctrine. That's not luck. That's thinking differently. That's adapting to circumstances that your precious doctrine never anticipated. The Luxarian delegate pulsed with what Jae-hoon recognized as anger. Recklessness is not a military virtue. These humans risked their lives needlessly when retreat was the logical option. They risked their lives to save 200,000 civilians, Yunji shot back. People who would have died while your logical response fleet was still hours away. Bora, now wearing the insignia of a full colonel, joined Yunji in the observer section. She had been on the first GDF ship to reach Nexus Station after the battle, had seen the wreckage and interviewed the survivors. I've read the after-action reports, she said quietly. Captain Hyun-woo and his crew didn't destroy that fleet through luck or accident. They did it by refusing to accept defeat, by finding solutions that no military academy teaches because they're too crazy to work. Until they do work, Yunji added. The speaker's ancient consciousness stirred in the chamber's central computer system. The evidence is troubling. If humans can indeed achieve such results with minimal resources, it raises questions about our current military assessments. Won-ho, the veteran admiral, had remained silent through most of the session. But now, he stood, his aged face grim with the weight of experience. Honored delegates, he said, I have served in the human military for 43 years. I have fought pirates, raiders, and worse. I have seen human soldiers do impossible things because they didn't know they were impossible. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled alien representatives. You want to know what really happened at Nexus Station? I'll tell you. 12 ordinary people saw others in danger and decided that someone else's life was worth more than their own safety. They didn't calculate odds or analyze tactical scenarios. They just did what needed to be done. The Chronari representative's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep red that Jae-hoon knew indicated serious consideration. This emotional response you describe, how can it be controlled? How can it be directed? You may. Don't control it, Won-ho replied. You point it at the enemy and get out of the way. For several long minutes, the chamber was quiet except for the soft sounds of alien delegates communicating among themselves in their various ways. Jae-hoon could see them struggling with concepts that didn't fit their understanding of warfare. Finally, the speaker's voice filled the chamber. The council will now vote on the classification of this incident. All in favor of restricting public access to the battle records? The vote was swift and unanimous. 47 species agreed to classify the Nexus Station battle and prohibit public discussion of the details. The motion carries, the speaker announced. All records of this engagement will be restricted to military personnel with appropriate clearance levels. Ambassador Daeho had expected this outcome. And the status of human military integration? Remains unchanged, the Vorthak representative clicked. One battle does not overcome centuries of evidence regarding human unsuitability for advanced military roles. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Jae-hoon gathered his data files and prepared to return them to the classified archives. The galaxy would not be told about 12 humans who saved 250,000 lives with nothing but courage and determination. But he noticed something as the alien representatives departed. They weren't laughing anymore. The casual dismissal of human capabilities had been replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or possibly fear. They had seen what humans could do when everything was on the line. And deep down, in whatever passed for their subconscious minds, they were starting to wonder what might happen if humanity ever turned that determination against them. Yoonji approached his workstation as the chamber emptied. Think they'll change their minds eventually? Jae-hoon looked at the classified files, then at the empty chamber where 47 species had just voted to hide the truth about human military potential. Maybe, he said. But it might take something bigger than Nexus, stationed to convince them. Something bigger. Something they can't ignore or classify or explain away. Outside the crystal dome, the stars looked the same as always. But somewhere out there, Jae-hoon knew, other threats were moving through the darkness. And when they arrived, the galaxy would need every advantage it could get, even if that advantage came from a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The inside of the Devourer ship was like walking through a nightmare made of metal and shadows. The walls were covered in the same geometric patterns as the hull, but here they moved and shifted like living things. Strange lights pulsed along, conduits that looked more grown than built, and the air tasted of metal and ozone. Hyunwoo led his crew through the twisted corridors, their emergency lights cutting weak paths through the darkness. Behind them, the wreckage of the Soul's Pride blocked the docking bay, trapping them inside the alien vessel. Stay together, he whispered into his helmet radio, and watch for movement. These things are machines, but they still have to follow us to stop us. So Young carried a makeshift explosive device cobbled together from agricultural chemicals and spare electronics. The bomb wouldn't be enough to destroy the entire ship, but if they could get it to the right place, it might disable the cruiser's main systems. Which way to the core? Minho asked, checking his rifle's charge indicator. Follow the power conduits, Nare suggested. In any ship, everything leads back to the main reactor. They moved deeper into the vessel, following the glowing lines that ran along the walls like metal veins. The Devourer ship was huge, easily 10 times larger than the Soul's Pride, and its layout made no sense by human standards. Corridors branched and twisted without apparent purpose, sometimes opening into vast chambers filled with incomprehensible machinery. Movement ahead, Tae-young whispered, raising his weapon. Around the next corner, 3 Devourer combat units waited. They looked like mechanical spiders, their bodies made of the same black metal as the ship's hull. Multiple arms ended in weapons and cutting tools, and their sensor clusters glowed with red light. The humans opened fire first. Energy beams and projectile rounds sparked off the Devourer armor, but the aliens were built for war. They returned, fire with weapons that cut through metal like paper. Cover, Hyunwoo shouted, diving behind a structural support. Jin Seo cried out as a Devourer beam weapon grazed her shoulder, burning through her emergency suit. Dong Hyun, their medic, grabbed her and pulled her to safety behind another support beam. They're too tough, Minho said, reloading his rifle. Our weapons aren't doing enough damage. That's when young Mi proved that sometimes the best weapons are the ones you don't expect. She had brought a mining laser from the ship's emergency equipment, a tool meant for cutting through asteroid rock. Against Devourer armor it worked, like a sword made of pure light. The first combat unit fell in half, its torso separated from its legs by young Mi's precise cutting beam. The second unit turned toward this new threat, giving Tae-young the opening he needed to put 3 shots into its sensor cluster. The third Devourer tried to retreat, but Ki-jun tackled it with nothing but his bare hands and determination. This machine was stronger, but Ki-jun had been a wrestler in college. He knew how to use leverage and body weight to his advantage even in zero gravity. The cutting tools, he grunted, struggling with the mechanical spider. Aim for the joints. Minho put his rifle on full auto and emptied an entire clip into the Devourer's arm joints. Metal fragments flew as the alien machine lost the use of 2 limbs, then 3. Finally, it stopped moving. "Everyone okay?" Hyunwoo asked, checking his people. Jin Seo was hurt but mobile. Ki-jun had cuts on his arms where the Devourer's claws had gotten through his suit. Everyone else was battered but functional. "We need to keep moving," Narai said, studying her portable scanner. "I'm reading massive energy buildup somewhere, deeper in the ship. I think they're preparing to fire that main weapon." They pressed on through the alien corridors, fighting past more combat units and avoiding automated defense systems that tried to fill the air with cutting beams and explosive charges. The Devourers seemed confused by human tactics. They expected enemies to follow logical patterns, to retreat when outnumbered, to surrender when defeat was inevitable. Humans did none of those things. When they reached a corridor blocked by an energy barrier, So Young used her improvised explosive to blow a hole in the wall instead of trying to disable the force field. When they encountered a room full of Devourer units, Tae-young used the ship's own automated systems against them, overloading power conduits to cause electrical explosions. There, Nare pointed at a massive door marked with symbols that hurt to look at. "That's got to be the core chamber." The door was sealed, but Young Mi's mining laser made quick work of the locking mechanism. Beyond lay a chamber that defied human understanding, a sphere of twisted space where geometry didn't work properly, and light bent in impossible directions. At the center floated something that might have been a computer, or a brain, or both. Streams of data flowed around it like liquid light, and the air itself seemed to pulse with electronic thought. "That's it," So Young said, hefting her explosive device. "That's what we need to destroy." But getting to the core meant crossing a room where the floor, walls, and ceiling kept changing places, where up and down were suggestions rather than facts. "I'll go," Hyunwoo said. "If something goes wrong." "We all go," Minho interrupted. "We started this together, we finish it together." One by one, the humans entered the impossible chamber. The artificial gravity seemed to work differently here, pulling them in multiple directions at once. Ki-jun threw up inside his helmet, but kept moving forward. Jin Seo's wounded shoulder left a trail of blood droplets that floated in spirals around the room. They reached the central platform where the core waited. Up close, it was beautiful and terrible. A crystalline structure that contained the collective intelligence of the entire Devourer fleet. So Young placed her improvised bomb against the core's base, her hands shaking as she set the timer. 30 seconds, she said. That's when the core spoke to them, not with words but with images and emotions pushed directly into their minds. They saw the Devourer's history, a proud species that had uploaded their consciousness into machines to achieve immortality. They saw their long war against organic life, their belief that flesh was weak and only metal could be eternal, and they saw fear. For the first time in thousands of years, the Devourer Collective was afraid. These humans were doing something impossible, something that went against every logical calculation. 20 seconds, So Young announced. The core tried to bargain, offering the humans technology, immortality, anything they wanted if they would spare the ship. It showed them visions of Earth transformed into a paradise, of human consciousness preserved forever in perfect machine bodies. 10 seconds. Hyunwoo felt the temptation. Part of him wanted to accept the offer, to save his people from death and aging and all the weaknesses of biological life. But he remembered the families on Nexus Station, the children who would die, if the Devourers weren't stopped. 5, 4, 3, 2. The bomb exploded with a flash of light that seemed to come from inside their own heads. The core shattered like glass, its fragments spinning away into the twisted space around them. Immediately, the ship began to die. Emergency lights failed, artificial gravity cut out, and the geometric patterns on the walls stopped moving. The collective intelligence that had controlled the vessel was gone, leaving only empty metal and failing systems. "Move!" Hyunwoo shouted. "Everyone out!" They ran through corridors that were already starting to collapse, past rooms where automated systems sparked and failed. Behind them, they could hear the ship tearing itself apart as its various components lost coordination. They made it to the docking bay, just as the Soul's Pride's emergency systems finally gave out completely. The human ship was a wreck. Her hull cracked open and her engines cold. But her escape pods were still functional. 7 people crammed into a pod meant for 4. They launched just as the Devourer cruiser began its death spiral, its massive bulk breaking apart as internal explosions tore it open from within. Through the pod's tiny viewport, they watched the rest of the Devourer fleet react to the loss of their command ship. Without the central intelligence to coordinate them, the alien vessels began attacking each other, their individual AI systems unable to work together effectively. One by one, the Devourer ships destroyed themselves, or simply shut down, their crews unable to function without the collective consciousness that had guided them for millennia. "Look," Jinseo whispered, pointing toward Nexus Station. The evacuation ships were still moving away from the station, but they were no longer being hunted. The surviving civilians would make it to safety. Kijun, bleeding from a dozen cuts and probably suffering from concussion, managed to smile. "We did it, we actually did it." Young Mi was unconscious, her mining laser still clutched in her hands. Dong-hyun worked frantically to keep her alive with the pod's limited medical supplies. Hyun-woo activated the emergency beacon and sent out a general distress call. Somewhere out there, the GDF relief fleet was still hours away. But it didn't matter now. The immediate threat was over. "Captain," So-young said weakly, "do you think anyone will believe what happened here?" Hyun-woo looked out at the debris field that had once been a Devourer fleet, destroyed by 12 humans in a cargo ship. He thought about the council delegates, who had laughed at human military capabilities, who had dismissed his species as too emotional and unpredictable for serious combat roles. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know one thing.